Hello, my name's Mark Saunders, and this is a YouTube video presentation on research ethics. In particular, we're going to define research ethics, look at why it's important, and then talk about different ethical positions. This YouTube video is one of the series of YouTube videos on research methods on my YouTube channel, Mark Saunders on Research Methods, and you can see the link in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide. In this video presentation, we're going to talk about what research ethics is, and then I'm going to give a couple of questions for you to think about, which are going to introduce us to issues related to research ethics and its importance. We're then going to talk a bit more about the importance of ethics in research. And as you'll see, the slide has now changed, and we've actually got a picture from the New York Times of a few years ago, which is talking about really why research ethics is definitely needed. It refers to the Tuskegee study, where people who had syphilis were left untreated to see the impact of it between 1932 and 1972 in the United States, even though there was a cure known for syphilis in terms of penicillin. And so it really shows about not acting ethically. We're also going to be talking about different ethical positions we can take and what researching ethically means for us. And there'll be references and further reading at the end. So let's start off with a definition of research ethics. Research ethics are the standards of researcher behaviour that guide the researcher in relation to the rights of their research subjects and those affected by them. And this includes the effect on the researcher as well. So it's about how you behave and about behaving so as not to do harm on your research participants and also on yourself. Now, invariably, these are influenced by the norms or social norms under which we live and also your own personal ethical position. And we'll be discussing that further as we move forward to these slides. They're also going to be affected by your universities or your professional associations code of ethics, or it might be called ethical guidelines or a statement of ethical practice or ethical principles and standards. But all these together are going to influence the research ethics you adopt. And we have to remember when we're talking about codes and guidelines, these tend to be written in abstract terms. And as Emma Bell says in her paper, they're very much designed to present misconduct. So I'm going to start off now by giving you a question. Which one of the following is not an ethical problem in research? Number 1, possible deception of participants. Number 2, potential to cause harm to participants. Number 3, breach of confidentiality of an organisation. Number 4, use of personal contact to gain access. And number 5, recording the IP address, that's the Internet Protocol address, in an online questionnaire after assurances have been given of about an anonymity. So which one of those do you think is not an ethical problem? Write down the number. Okay, now we'll start to look for it. Obviously, we should not be deceiving people. So deception of participants is an ethical problem. We should be open and honest with what the research is about and what we're doing. Similarly, we should not be causing harm to our participants. So potential to cause harm is also an ethical problem. In terms of confidentiality, what we mean here is not revealing the identity of the organisation or presenting our data we collect in a way where that organisation can be identified. So a breach of confidentiality is also an ethical issue. The next one, use of personal contact to gain access, that's perfectly fine. That's not an ethical problem. Although obviously we have to explain exactly why we want to gain access and make sure that our contact or friend perhaps isn't unhappy to do so. And finally, the recording of the IP address in an online questionnaire after assurance of anonymity have been given out is definitely an ethical issue, because if you say it's going to be anonymous or confidential, in this case, if you say it's going to be anonymous, this means not even the researcher knows who they are. Then to actually collect the IP address means that you will know who actually responded, so it's no longer anonymous. Therefore, you shouldn't do it. Let's have a second question. Which one of the following stances is unethical? And we have 5 stances here. Employees refusing to participate even after their management have given approval. Number 2, approaching employees directly after management has given approval. Number 3, collecting data without consent from participants or respondents. Participants will be more likely to be interviewed, respondents will be a questionnaire. Number 4, establishing a relationship with the employer to encourage their participation. And number 5, ensuring researcher safety. And we're looking for the one that is unethical. And the one that's unethical is number 3, collecting data without consent from participants or respondents. And this became major news a few years ago when Cambridge Analytica were collecting personal information from Facebook about the Facebook users without their consent. And this led to a greater understanding of personal data and caused for much stricter legislation to stop it happening in the future. So, what have we learned in overview from these 2 questions? The first thing is we've learned that it relates to not only collecting data but also to analysing data and to gaining access. So it relates to all stages of the research process. The second is it involves you or me as a researcher in acting in a moral and responsible way in relation to the rights of those who are subject to or affected by the research. And this action of being moral and caring is also about caring for ourselves as researchers. The other thing we've learnt is that because it's dependent on social norms, moral and responsible can be defined in different ways, and it is dependent upon these social norms. And the other thing we've noticed is that it's important for all forms of research, not just questionnaires, not just interviews, not just observation, not just secondary data, but all forms of research. If we look in more detail, we can also see that we've learned some other ethical issues. First of all, we've learned that there is a need for privacy of not only the actual participants, but also people who are invited to participate but decide not to later. We've learned that participation is voluntary and that people can withdraw at any time. We've learned that we need to ask people's consent before we collect data. We've learned that confidentiality and anonymity are important if promised, and that data storage also needs to be addressed to ensure that the data remain confidential and anonymous. This is incredibly important with the rise of use of big data. We've also had hints about participants' reactions during data collection. We need to try and minimise embarrassment, stress, discomfort or pain, and the harm needs to be minimised and support put in place, unlike on the study of Tuskegee, where support wasn't put in place and harm wasn't minimised. They carried on not treating people later. We've learned that researchers need to behave ethically, and finally we've known that our own safety as researchers is also crucial. So, why is research in ethical so important? And the illustration on the right hand side actually emphasises something. Being ethical is not a sticking plaster which you do afterwards. It's part of the entire process. The first reason why research in ethics is important is we need to be rigorous in our research, and our claims need to be founded on good research where data has been collected correctly and well. We owe our participants or our respondents a duty of care and to protect them from harm. We also need to protect ourselves, the researchers, from harm, and we owe ourselves a duty of care. And finally, we need to be good citizens as researchers, behaving responsibly in our dealings with other people. When we talk about researcher ethical positions, there are 2 main ethical positions. These are sometimes called philosophical ethical positions. The first is the deontological view, and this is about following rules to guide our conduct. So this is saying these are the ethical rules and we follow them. Here are our ethical guidelines or our ethical conduct. And within the deontological view, acting outside these rules can never be justified. However, if the rules are inadequate, we need to reappraise and amend them so that we can then follow them exactly. So that's the deontological view, which is we follow the rules to guide our conduct and we follow our ethical guidelines. The alternative is the teleological view. And this says that what we do ethically is determined by its consequences, and we need to look at the benefits and the negative consequences and weigh them up and decide which is most sensible. And it might be argued that in the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in Negro males, this was a case of carrying on not giving them penicillin because the benefits were argued to outweigh the costs. Obviously, I consider now it's considered completely unethical to have done so. And it really relates to that third little bullet point. Just comparing costs and benefits is unlikely to work. So the cornerstone of any ethical position is about non-maleficence. That means avoiding harm both to yourself and others in terms of research participants. And as part of this, we're looking at beneficence for people. We're looking to make sure that in acting ethically, we respect people, we're fair, we do good, and we act with real integrity. Research in an ethical manner therefore means acting appropriately in relation to the rights of those who are going to become the subject of our research, and also the rights of those affected by the research, including the researcher. It also means not causing harm, and here key ethical issues to ensure we don't cause harm are not deceiving participants, being very careful in any financial inducements that are offered and probably not use them very often. Indeed, many universities do not allow us to use financial inducements when undertaking research. Being aware of possible psychological stress and putting in safeguards to minimise it. And thinking carefully about access to confidential information. And if information is confidential, making sure we keep that confidence. And obviously, as part of research in an ethical manner, we have to ensure that ethical guidelines or codes from our university or our professional association are followed fully. And we have to remember that ethical issues can occur throughout your research, right the way from the beginning through to the end. It's just not only about data collection. I'd like to give you a few references and further reading. Emma Bell and Alan Bryman's paper on the ethics of management research in the British Journal of Management is a really useful read about how ethics is undertaken in management research. The YouTube video by Starr on the ethics behind the Tuskegee Syphilis study is really good. It's very short, but it actually gives you the background to that study and also why ethics is so important in the research we do. And finally, my own book with Phil and Adrian, Research Methods of Business Students, the second part of Chapter 6 deals with research ethics. I hope you found this YouTube video presentation useful, and I'd be really grateful if you'd subscribe to my channel, Mark Saunders on Research Methods, and also told your friends and colleagues about the channel as well. I'm adding new videos to the channel nearly every week, and hopefully they'll be of help to you in your own research.